My name is Allison Lambert, and I'm here to talk about flowers, just to make sure you're in the right class. I am from Oklahoma, and I've been growing flowers to sell to florists since 2020, basically. I had to look through, I was just thinking about how to introduce myself, but I looked back through photos. I started in 2019, and I got my first high tunnel in we put it up at the end of 22. I had a small greenhouse that was heated that we built, but I have one high tunnel that's 30 by 96, and just last week, just in time for the cold weather, we put up our second that's 30 by 80. So we are a 2-tunnel operation now. But this morning we're going to talk about cool flowers or hardy annuals. We're not really going to dive into selling or growing in tunnels or selling to florists or anything like that. My first 3 years, I grew all of these flowers in the ground through the winter, just with like Agavon, throw cover, things like that. So it can be done, and I had to really dig in my brain to remember all those things. But you can have all of these flowers without any kind of structures, because I know a lot of it is just growing in your yard, and some of us don't have the space for structures. So I'm making sure I'm doing all the things they told me to do. Silence your phones and keep your questions till the end. So I got started growing flowers for my wedding 11 years ago. I got a wild idea to grow all my own flowers. And I had been working for my cousin Luke, does market gardening, and him and Shantae helped me grow all the flowers for our wedding, and it was a real adventure. It worked out somehow. I don't know how we even had a frost, but and that kind of spurred my love of flowers. After that, I grew flowers in my vegetable garden behind the house, which is right next to like our busy feed store. And I had a lot of people that would ask me to come pick flowers because most of my garden transitioned to flowers. So in 2019, I opened it as a U-pick, and I let people come and pick flowers. We just had like tender annuals. We didn't do anything hardy yet. In 2020, I decided, well, it would be the fall of 2019, I decided I was going to sell to florists because I had people asking if they could buy flowers from me, and I had read this book, Cool Flowers, by Lisa Mason Ziegler, and this book, The Flower Farmer, and of course, The Cut Flower Garden, Floret Farms. And I had gotten really inspired that I could grow all these flowers through the winter, because I had been talking to my dad about it, and he's like, Allison, these are essentially just wheat, and we plant a lot of wheat, and it survives through the winter. So we planted, the space that would be my tunnel now, like a 30 by 96 space, and then it was COVID, and there was nowhere to sell flowers. So I started selling flowers in the market with Luke. We made bunches and bouquets and stuff, but it has evolved very quickly. Like, I was looking through the pictures, and I just can't believe how much we've grown over the last few years. But like I say, the first 3 years I grew all of these flowers through the winter without any structure. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about this morning. And then this afternoon we're going to dive more into growing in tunnels and selling to florists, which are my favorite topics. So let's see. So what is a cool flower? Cool flowers is a term coined by Lisa Mason Ziegler. She wrote this book, and if you're interested in growing hardy annuals at all, this is a great book. I brought them all so you guys can look at them. And Lynn, I can never say her last name. Bazinski, yes. I always get her and Aaron's name mixed up. They both have a lot of information about growing cool flowers, but I kind of transitioned to calling them hardy annuals just because that's what they are technically. So a hardy annual or a cool flower is a cold tolerant annual. It technically goes through its entire life cycle in 1 year. As I was writing this, the lines get a little muddy between hardy annuals and perennials. And some of these could be called a perennial that we're going to talk about. So they will definitely last more than a year. Most of them I treat as annuals because when you're selling and you want to know how much you're going to have, you don't know if the perennial is going to come back, and so you treat it as an annual. So I think that's kind of where things get muddy in how to term them. But they need cold temperatures to develop properly. So these are flowers that we're going to plant in the fall normally, and they need that cold period to develop their roots. All winter they're just like developing roots, and then in the spring, as it starts to warm up, the days start to get a little bit longer, they're going to flourish. And some of them, if you're in a really cold area, you can plant spring. Some of them I plant fall and spring to get kind of different timing. But that was a question actually I was going to ask before I started. What areas you're from? So raise your hand if you're in zone 5. I'm not a big fan of zones, but if you know your zone, is anybody that cold? Zone 6?
5.
You 5? Oh, you're cold then, yeah. So you're going to want to plant in the spring. Okay, how about 7? I think a lot of us are in that, yeah. Is anybody, yeah, 6 and 7 to me are really, at least, you're kind of, I would consider you to be in a similar zone as us. Because we get cold, we get hot. Like I said, zones are like a term that I don't usually like because Pacific Northwest is like zone 6, and they're very different from us.
About 8.
8, so like down in here, down in Texas and stuff, yeah, you can definitely, you want to plant in the fall to let them establish. The warmer zones, and this is a problem that I've had, this year, the plants will develop like too much, and then we get this super cold, and it's going to be a little harder to protect like a foot tall plant. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so I did put online just kind of an outline of what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to try to stick to it. But these are the different things that we're going to talk about: the location of where to plant them, starting the seeds, timing, spacing, how you can protect your plants, irrigation, supporting, and fertilizing. So this first class is we're going to kind of try to cover all of this. And then the next hour, we're going to talk about specific flowers and more. So this is all just kind of a general thing for hardy annuals. So before you plant hardy annuals, it takes a little bit more planning than just throwing out zinnia seeds. Like these are going to be in the ground for a while. They need a little bit more care. Most of them are still very simple and easy to grow. They will do great, but you just need to be a little more prepared for the elements. Most of them like full sun, and I put drainage on here because for us, a lot of times it can get really wet in the winter, and then it like does not go away for weeks. It's because there's no real sun or heat to absorb it. So I put my first high tunnel knot in the best location, and every spring this is what the corn looks like. So choosing a place that has good drainage, or you can create good drainage by raised beds. Assessing the wind. So ideally, what you will do if you're going to plant these in your yard is assess your yard. Like pick a day that you can really watch the sun. If you're going to get rain, see what the drainage looks like, or if it's windy, things just to note, and you can write them down, and you can choose like a little area of your yard that maybe has a little bit of a different microclimate, that it's got like a fence that protects them from the wind, or something like that. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure that they have enough sun and that the water will run away. Okay, I think this is the the hardest part of learning how to plant hardy annuals is knowing when to start your seeds, because it is a little tricky and it is a little intimidating, I would say, if it's because you're gonna let these plants like weather the Arctic blast that's coming. Like you're just gonna let them, and that can be intimidating. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the different ways that you can start your seeds. So direct seeding is one, I don't do a whole lot of this anymore, but there's a lot of flowers that you can direct seed and they will do great. And if you get them established one time, they're gonna keep coming back every year. Prime example is bachelor buttons. Bachelor buttons, larkspur, agrostemma, I don't plant those anymore. They just do their thing and come back. So the main point is to make sure that your soil is cool enough. So it seems opposite, right, of what you're used to doing with like tender annuals. So you really want the soil to be less than 60 degrees. Larkspur will just sit there if it's not cool enough. And then you're gonna lose a lot of your seed, or it'll sprout and it'll dry up. So they technically say 6 to 8 weeks before your first frost in the fall, and then let them overwinter as a small plant. Or you can do it in the spring, like early spring. I usually wait until we've had our first hard frost, not like just a little bit of cold. I'll wait. I don't really plant anything nowadays till November, December. So at least I think most areas, unless you are in like zone 5 or something like that, you'll get like a really cold day and it kind of kills everything off, but then it's gonna warm back up. But your soil is gonna at least start to cool off. So I usually wait, and you can get a temperature probe for your soil if you're really interested, but it needs to be around 60 degrees or cooler for them to germinate. So that's why a lot of people will wait till winter. That's a whole nother topic, is winter sowing things. So how I do direct seeding is I make a 3-foot bed, and I take the point of a hoe and just drag down and make, if we do 6 rows in that 3-foot bed. So that's around 6 inches apart or so, and then we go through and sprinkle the seeds, and then let them go. I don't cover them up. I don't do anything with soil, at least. When I first started all of these, I watered them really good and then put Agribond fabric to keep the birds and bunnies and everything from digging, and it helps keep your seeds moist. You don't have to do that though, because there's a lot of times I don't do all these things that I'm preaching. The biggest thing is thinning them out once they grow. So this is a little bit harder once they start self-sowing, but as you can see, there's rows here. This is like not the best picture, but I was trying to show how the rows are. I hardly ever thin bachelor buttons, larkspur, anything like that. I have some flower farmer friends in Oklahoma, and they like to tell me I'm a rebel for how I grow my larkspur. I just let it go. They're like, you don't do it like all 6 inches apart? No, I don't. It does. The further apart you spread it, we're going to talk about specific flowers later, the stems just get huge and they're like unusable. So I let them really crowd, but it's good to thin a little bit. So, for weed control for direct seeding can be a little bit challenging, but I have found that if you wait until your soil is cool enough and then you direct seed, they'll sprout a lot quicker and you're not going to have as many problems with weeds. So really the only weed that I struggle with is like henbit in the winter, which is easy to pop out. But if you have it in rows like this, it's pretty easy just to run your hoe through, and a lot of times I'll throw leaves on them too, just to help keep the weeds down. Okay, so starting your seeds inside. I don't want to talk about this too much because I know that like they have classes about starting seeds and stuff. This is more, I wanna focus on the timing part of it. Hardy annuals can be a little bit hard to start by seed inside for us because it's so hot when you need to start them. So you can either use grow racks with lights inside. I put them in my tunnel under the shade cloth, but it's key to not start them too early. And it's like August and you think you need to start all your seeds, but I really don't start any hardy annual seeds until like mid-September, maybe even the end of September, because you really want these plants to be babies. You don't want them to be big giants going in the ground. If they're too big, they won't take the winter very well. So don't get in a hurry, that's the biggest. But you really have to, it's practice, and it's just kind of testing out your area. But again, they require cool temps for germination, so it can be a little tricky. It's a lot of times you have to do it inside if you don't have some kind of shade that can be protected. So this is because we're so hot when I need to be starting seeds, I purchase a lot of plugs. So they come as tiny little, I select a date and they come to me when I need to plant them. So most of them come the first week in November for me. Farmer Bailey, you can purchase now small trays, you can get mixed trays even for like home gardeners. If you're on a larger scale, you can do ball seed, but some of these are even like at your local greenhouse. We're gonna talk about pansies is like the #1 hardy annual. Every local greenhouse has pansies. So, but yeah, plugs are definitely a bonus, easy thing for me. It's just a lot easier. Okay, so the spacing on planting, the spacing for planting hardy annuals is really gonna depend on what you're wanting to get from your hardy annuals. So if this is your yard and you're just wanting to do it for pretty flowers in your yard, most people do it more like 8 inches. You can do them as close as 6 inches, but like I said, it gets a little muddy in between the perennial hardy annual zone. So some of them that can perennialize, you may want to give them a little bit more space. For me, I can't. Nothing is spaced more than 6 inches. Most things are actually more like 4. Some things are actually only like 2, like they're on top of each other. So they can be planted really close together or spread out. Like I said, that's kind of going to be your, however you're wanting to use them. They're going to get taller stems if they're closer together. So if you're wanting to cut them, it's better to be close. Okay, so protecting your baby plants. This is the hardest part is knowing when to protect them and when to just let them not. So we're getting ready to get a bunch of like snow and ice, apparently, we'll see. Snow is a great insulator, so it's really hard to let them just be out there in the snow, but they will thrive if they're covered in snow. They'll actually do much better than if you cover them and then it collapses on them and everything else. One of the main reasons that I used covers when I was growing just in the open field was for wind protection. Wind is a lot harder on the plants than the cold. So at least in our area, we have crazy winds. So I would build these like Agribon low tunnels, and it's basically you just get wire and stretch your Agribon across it and just put weights on the sides. I don't want to go into too much detail about it. It's in this book, and I can show you if you're interested in that. I didn't do that for a super long time because we have such crazy winds. We needed a little bit more structure because I would go out and the fabric would just be like flying everywhere no matter what I put on them. So we started building these low tunnel structures, And I think there's a couple different companies that you can actually get kits for them. We built them. It was an experience. But we just put rebar in the ground and stretched PVC pipe between the two pieces of rebar and stretched plastic across. And you use rope. But there's a lot of tutorials and stuff that I can show you for those if you're interested. And then sometimes I will just put fabric on the plants on the ground. I planted my whole second tunnel and we still didn't have it up. So we covered them with fabric and hay. And the other thing, biggest thing for like covering them is protects them from deer. Knowing when to put the fabric on is also kind of you kind of have to just play with it. I don't cover anything unless it's gonna get like in the low 20s. If it's gonna get down in like 10 degrees or so, I'll put fabric on them. But I would rather them not grow and get huge because I know that a storm is coming like this weekend, and I'd rather not baby them too much. It's better to let them survive. That sounds mean, but this is a picture, I believe it was 2021. I was trying to look back through pictures. We had 2 weeks that the temperatures did not get above like 20 degrees. It was so cold, and it snowed some, but not enough to really protect anything. So I found these pictures. Can you guys see that? There's like a real glare on it for me. These are pictures that I took of the plants after it warmed up. So this is larkspur. Like, it's completely unfazed. It was frozen for 2 weeks. This one's bachelor buttons. It's got a little bit of frostbite, but it came out of it fine. And this one is agrostemma. So like, they're tough. We baby them, but they are tough. Okay. Irrigating. This is kind of I don't know. In the flower world, there's a lot of different opinions about how to water flowers. When they're small, I usually overhead water. But setting up a drip irrigation system is ideal, especially for in the spring, because if the flowers get wet, your petals will brown. So that's what happens with a lot of home gardener type things. If they're not protected, your flowers are really beautiful, and then we get this crazy storm in the spring, and they're all on the ground. But I overhead water until they're established, and then we set up drip tape. And drip tape is just like a plastic tape that has little slits that the water just drips out of slowly, so it can soak up. And actually, I listened to a podcast on the way down here. I meant to write down what it was because this looks super interesting to me. A Sumi soaker. It's kind of like a soaker hose, but it's becoming really popular in the flower growing world. It's like a fine mist, and it goes out like 30 feet, so you can water your whole garden area with one hose instead of setting up drip tape, and it doesn't go up like high. I don't know. Has anybody seen one of those? What is it called? It's called a Sumi soaker. S-U-M-I soaker. Yeah, so I actually texted my husband last night, so I need to get one of these. So there's lots of different options, but I think in the veg world, a lot of times they're starting to do more overhead watering. We just can't hardly do that in the flower world because it'll mess up your flowers. But when they're not blooming, you can get them started with overhead. And they need a lot of water to get established. Once they're established, you hardly water all winter, unless you just have a really warm winter. Okay.
What is established? Oh, no. No question.
Write it down. Okay, so the other thing with a lot of the hardy annuals is getting them supported. A lot of them get really big because they've sat there all winter and they've got this really great root structure. And then in the spring, they shoot up and they have these beautiful flowers, and then they get top heavy and fall over. So there's different ways that you can support them. It's called Bordenova netting, and I just put it, you can kind of see here, like there's the electric fence post, and we just string it across, and the plants just grow up through it, and that will hold them up. That's the most popular way. You can stake them if it's just in your garden, or you can build your own sort of netting out of wire panels, like square wire panels, and just use it over and over and over again. But they need support. A lot of them will really benefit from a pinch. So you pinch out the middle of the plant, and then it will branch out. I hardly ever pinch anything because winter usually does it naturally. That'll just get a little bit of frost and it kills out the center, and you'll get a bunch of branching. But so that's what pinching is. It's going to give you a lot more flowers. It's hard to do at first, but once you get used to it and realize that you're going to get a lot more blooms, it's worth it. Oops. Okay, so fertilizing. This is one I need to practice what I preach. I'm really terrible at fertilizing my hardy annuals, but I usually use Neptune's Harvest or like a Fox Farm, and in the winter, like since it's been so warm, they tell you to do it every 2 weeks during heavy growth. I hardly ever fertilize in the winter because I don't want them to grow as much as they're growing. It's just like this winter has been so warm, and I don't want to encourage them to get any bigger than they're already getting, because I know that the cold is going to hit eventually. But I always use like a backpack sprayer and do foliar feeding. Sometimes I'll run it through my drip tape, but I just find it a lot easier, and I feel like they do better with the foliar feeding. I feel like I wrote down which ones. Okay, so yeah, Neptune's Harvest. During the winter, if I do it, it's called Rose and Flowering, and it's got a higher nitrogen. And then I'll switch to just like a more basic seaweed fertilizer. But if you've got good soil, most of them don't need a lot of anything extra. Okay, so hardy annuals, that's kind of the basics of planting them. Overall, like I said at the beginning, it takes a little bit more thought. Like you need to think through what you're gonna do, when you're gonna start them, get your seeds on time, and how you're gonna protect them if it does start dropping to negative temperatures. But the plants are tougher than you think. And I think this was a little bit easier for me just because I grew up, we're surrounded by wheat, and they plant wheat in the fall. We don't do a thing to it. And in the spring it grows and it blooms. So that was an easy transition for me. I had never really heard of these until I got those books. But like I said, plants are tougher than you think. This picture is maybe not the best picture, but it would have been last fall, I planted a bunch of flowers in one of my cousin's tunnels because they're in Africa, so I'm borrowing it. And we had that terrible storm this last spring that like the wind was horrific. And it blew the plastic off of it. And I just kind of, like everything got completely smashed. Everything was broken, and I was like, the rabbits kept eating what survived. So I just didn't even go down there until, it was like the first week of May or so, and Shantae texted me and she's like, Maria came in with like a bucket full of beautiful snapdragons. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, your tunnel is blooming. So I went down there and I picked hundreds of snapdragons for Mother's Day. And I hadn't done a thing. The plastic had not protected them. I hadn't opened, closed, I hadn't done anything. Snapdragons are one of the tougher ones, but plants are tougher than you think. We don't give them enough credit. Okay, that's kind of, I was gonna take a little break, and I'm sure there's lots of questions. I wanted to just kind of do a brief overview of planting them, and then over the next hour, we'll talk about specific ones. I'm trying real hard to not go into the florist side of it, because that's what I do so much of. So I wanted to just keep it kind of brief so we can have questions. I'm not even sure what time this is supposed to, is it at 10:30? 10:45? Okay, so do we have questions? Yes.
So how do you know when they're established and they don't need as much water?
Okay, how do you know when they're established and they don't need as much water? I usually overhead water for at least 2 weeks before I decide that they're established. Usually, just by looking at the soil, you can tell that the soil is moist. You probably don't need to water anymore. But they do, when they're babies, they do take a lot of water. Good drainage, but lots of water. So I don't know if there's like a clear, like how to know that they're established, unless you like give them a little tug and feel that they're secure in their roots. But I usually do try for the first 2 weeks to water them every day, sometimes twice a day, if it's super windy and hot. Because even in November, I mean, it was 86 degrees on Christmas, so we were watering. So yeah. Any other questions? In the back.
Weed control.
Okay.
Weeds.
Yes. I thought I had that in here. Maybe it's on a different one, but we'll talk about it. Okay, weed control. My first few years, I used the like black landscape fabric and burn poles and all those things. I don't really do that anymore because I've gotten pretty established. I use the same beds. But yeah, the black fabric is great if you can get your plants big enough before it starts getting hot in the spring, because then it makes it even hotter. You want to keep their roots cool as long as possible. So it's got its pros and cons, but yeah, I use the landscape fabric and burn poles, and but now I use a lot of leaves, because a lot of times I'll plant right before all the leaves start falling off the trees, and it just kind of naturally goes there. And so I've started just putting them more, and that's what a lot of people do too. You can use wood chips. It really depends on the style of garden that you're trying to establish. If you're trying to do like market bouquets, market gardening, or if you're just wanting it for your yard, that's probably the difference. But I used the landscape fabric for years, and it puts your drip tape underneath, and it works really great. It's just a booger to get out in the spring. That's why I quit using it, to be honest. I would have to like attach my tractor to it and just pull. And then a lot of times you have to start over with the fabric because you've ripped it in half. So, but yeah, I use the fabric or leaves. Any other questions? Yes.
Since, most of us probably did plant in the fall, if I was to grow snapdragons, for example, is it too late to plant them now in the spring if I'm in the center?
No. Just a minute. My allergies have been so bad down here. Okay, snapdragons, if you didn't plant in the fall, can you still plant them? Is that kind of what you're? Yes, for sure. You can even start seeds. I actually usually do a succession the first week of March, and I usually plant them outside. As long as they have a little bit of cool period, they will do great. And then when I start my own seeds, I usually do like 4 to 6 weeks. If they're too big, when you put them out, they don't do very well, I've found. So I think you definitely still have time if you go home and get them started immediately. But yeah, the biggest thing is protecting them from the wind to get established. that can be hard in the winter time.
Okay.
But yeah, I do a succession outside. It's usually the first or second week of March.
But then you would direct seed, but you're saying if I start them in,
No, I plant them out. I don't direct seed any snapdragons.
okay,
I actually don't even start any of my own snapdragons anymore. They're,
okay.
I don't have the patience. I don't have the patience. I don't know if you've ever grown snapdragon seeds. They are like finer than dust.
Yes.
If I do grow them from seed, I just like sprinkle them in a 10-20 tray or whatever, and then I'll kind of put them out in clumps. But I just don't, because we'll talk about this a little bit more. I try to not talk about plugs too much, but I get all my snapdragon plugs from Farmer Bailey or Ball Seed. A lot of times they're like 20-30 cents a piece, and you can charge at least $1.50 a stem. It's pretty profitable and a lot easier when you start thinking about your time starting those seeds. For me to seed a tray of snapdragons takes forever, and then keeping those seeds moist till they germinate, it's just not worth it for me. Maybe when I don't have little kids, but I just don't have the time right now. So I get plugs the first week of March. I get 6 288 trays, however many that, like 1,400 of them. And we'll talk about spacing for snapdragons too. And I plant them all out in a row, and they do fine.
So, just one last thing, when you say too big, what do you mean, like how many inches tall would be too big to plant?
How big is too big for snapdragons, planting them out? It really does kind of depend on when you're doing it, but if the beginning of March, I'm not sure that you could have them too big.
Not leggy.
Yeah, you don't want them like lanky, for sure, but even if you have them planted out and it gets cold, they'll just get a pinch. They are the hardiest, like my snapdragon story. I have gone out, even after cold days, if like I pulled it out of the tray and it kind of snapped off or something and I just kind of put it over to the side, I'll go out and it's still alive. It's not even in the ground. So they're extremely hardy. That's one of the, if you're in 4 or 5 that cold, you can grow them through winter. But yeah, I just don't like them to get too leggy is the main thing. And I don't actually want them to be pinched usually because I want a big thick stem. That's what my florist like, so. Okay. Kelly?
What's your method with the plastic netting, the support netting? I tried it for a couple of years, but it's such a pain. I feel like there's gotta be a way. What do you do for securing it when it's up, but also at the end of the season when you rip it out? Do you wait till the plants are dead and take it out? Do you cut everything off and then take it out? What do you do with that?
Okay, so how do I treat the plastic netting? For removing it is probably more your question, right?
Yeah,
And-
and I have trouble putting it up too, and just like keeping the tension and just like where it's actually supporting.
So putting it up, let's start with that. Putting up the plastic netting. I put posts on the ends of a row, and I have it on a stick. I'm usually doing most things by myself. I have it on like a post, as long as it's on a wheel. I always try to buy it on a roll. It's way easier than unfolding it. The unfolding it is not, oh my goodness, that is stressful. But if you can get it on a roll, even if you're gonna get a lot, you'll use it eventually. It's not like super expensive. Yeah, I pull it, I'll unroll it all the way to the other end, and then I go through and put the side posts in. That's the easiest way for me. If I do have to unfold it, I kind of do the same way, and I'll lay it all out. But a lot of times, I am using it for spacing, like I plant into it, and so I'll leave it there on the ground, and then if for plants that I know are gonna need support, I'll leave it on the ground, which we'll talk about that spacing. Spacing, the squares are 6 inches apart, so if you're wanting your plants to be 6 inches apart, you can unroll it on the ground and put 1 plant per square. And it's perfect spacing, it's easy to weed because they're in lines. But I'll leave it on the ground because it kind of deters like bunnies and stuff too. And then once they start getting a little bit bigger, I'll put the posts in and just raise it up basically.
This is like T-posts.
Yes, I use electric fence posts.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll put T-posts on the very end just for a little bit more like weight support if they're really heavy flowers. But I use electric fence posts just from like Tractor Supply or local farm store. And then at the end, this is the worst part. I have like a battery powered hedge trimmer thing. And I go through, if they're not already dead, and for the most part, I will say my spring flowers, I cut on them so hard, there's not a lot to pull out above the netting. But if you have a lot like summer flowers, yeah, it's terrible. I use the hedge trimmer, I just go through and cut right above the netting, and then it comes off a lot easier. That's the only way. Or if they're totally out of control, I hook it to my tractor and just go. And I try to reuse it, but yeah, sometimes it's not worth it. But yeah, a lot of times the spring stuff, it's a lot easier, I think, just because I've cut on them so hard. Okay, did you have a question?
How high do you put the netting?
Okay, that's a good question. How high do you put the netting? They say, there's a lot of different opinions about this. They say to put it about half the height of what your plant's final height should be. So like if they're gonna be like 3 foot tall, put it about a foot and a half, 2 feet up. Like my snapdragons are usually about my shoulder, and I usually put the netting about hip height. Some people will put 2 layers of netting, which is, as we just talked about, removing it is horrific. It's not worth it. Really, if you're gonna put 2 layers of netting, it's easier just to put in more stakes to support the netting. Because that's usually the problem, is you've gotten top heavy, just raise your netting up. So with snapdragons, if you can't tell, snapdragons are my favorite. I grow a lot of snapdragons. I put it, like when the plants are about a foot tall, I put it in. And I put it right above the plants, and as they grow, I raise it up until it's about like about a foot and a half, 2 foot. So that way, because we have so much wind, they have a little bit of support, because even when they're only this tall, they'll fall over pretty easily. So, yeah. Does that make sense? Okay.
Is there more than one kind of snapdragon? I've only seen them about this
Oh,
tall. and
there's
you're saying
so many
shoulder
kinds of
height.
snapdragons. I was gonna
huge.
talk about that in when we should maybe, what time is it supposed to be over?
10:45.
Okay. Yes. There's tons of different kinds of snapdragons. And there's cut flower varieties, but the ones you've seen are probably like in garden centers. And they're more for like home garden. They don't get as tall, you don't have to support them. I'm trying to decide if I should, in the next hour, we were gonna talk about each specific hardy annual and like growing them. So we'll just keep doing questions. Did you have a question?
That was my question, is what else can you grow?
Yes, okay. Let me just go, we'll just move on to the next. That's easier.
There's one more question.
Okay, Miss Debbie,
I
yes.
just wanna know, as a home gardener, how many, if you wanna buy plugs, will they sell them to you in like,
So
a
Farmer
dozen
Bailey
or-
now, if you look up farmerbailey.com, he has a section of his website, which is where I get a lot of my plugs, that is for home gardeners now. And you can get like split trays, you can get, I haven't really looked at it too closely. Some of them you can only get like 6 plugs of each thing, so you can.
12 or 6.
Yeah.
Smaller.
Yeah, it's a lot smaller quantities. They just started that, maybe in the last few months, I think. So, okay, yes,
Just could you give us some names of those books that you have there?
yes. And you're welcome to come look at them too, if you would like. This one is Cool Flowers, by Lisa Mason Ziegler. She was kind of the one, like I said, that coined that term, Cool Flowers, for hardy annuals. she has a neat story. She has a lot of classes online and stuff now. The Flower Farmer
We
by
have
Lynn.
a book,
Oh.
we have those books at the bookstore.
Do you have them at the bookstore? Okay, I
At
wasn't.
our bookstore.
Okay. Yes, so this one's by Lynn Basinski. She was really the original flower farmer, I would say, that really, well, I don't know if original is the right word, but she kind of brought the movement back into the States. And I think a lot of times, Erin Benzigein, or Kine, however you say her name, gets credit for that from Florette Flower, but really Lynn was the first one that really. So this one is Cut Flower Gardens. It's good, but she's in the Pacific Northwest, like, and her garden is growing is very different than ours. Lynn is a lot more like, it's just more practical. It's a lot. There's a lot of stuff in here.
She's in Kansas, but she also has
Yeah.
interviews with people all over the United States.
Yes, she actually has Vicky from Bear Creek she has a big farm in Oklahoma. She has an interview, she talks about her in here, so it's just a lot more practical. So those are oh, this one is less. This one's called Small Farm Big Dreams. This is a farm, it's called Pepper Hollow Farm. This is one I got recently, and they have a lot of good information in here, especially if you're just starting. I actually got this because they got hit by a tornado, and it like took out a ton of their farm, and this was like a fundraiser for them. So, but it has a lot of very good, especially if you're wanting to turn it into a business. These can be practical for a business or just your home garden. Okay, let's just kind of go through we'll take a break. Okay, so
I have
some
a
of
quick
these I
question.
don't really.
So
Yes.
one more question.
Yes.
Farmer Bailey's, do you have to have, and maybe it's different by state, do you have to have a commercial license in order
Not
to
anymore.
buy the big amounts of stuff?
Yes, to get the big amounts to set up your account, I believe you have to, although I did see something where you could maybe get them, but you have to pay like tax
Oh,
and
gotcha.
stuff like that.
Okay.
The only thing with plugs that you run into is the shipping. That's, man, it gets expensive, but yeah, you may be able to, you can buy it.
Without a commercial license.
From Farmer Bailey, you can get the big trays.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, you can get small, and I am remembering an email that said, because he said either send in your information or we'll start when they kind of transition, so. Okay, Ami or Dara chocolate lace flower, I kind of put these in the same group. I don't really grow them that much anymore because this is like wild in the ditches, around our farm, so, but I put it on here because it is one that can self-seed, it's really beautiful, and it's pretty popular with florists, and once you get it established, it's hard to get rid of. I will also say, I put the hardy zones on here that are from this book she has. There's really not a lot of information on a lot of these flowers to how hardy they are. I mean, I would probably plant this Ami in like zone 5. It's indestructible, I think. Kind of like larkspur. Okay, this one, I kind of clumped these all together because these are ones that I direct seed. They're easy to grow. They're fun to put in bouquets. You can have them as just something pretty in your yard. They'll keep blooming for a while. But they can, if you're wanting them to be for florists, they're a little bit more of a one-hit wonder. So like Agrostemma, I know a girl and she starts it from seed and she like plants it out and she does so much work. And mine comes back every year. I don't start it, but the florists really love it. So it's one that I love it. I should have put a picture. I have so many pictures. It was overwhelming. But it's just a really pretty airy flower out in your garden. It just kind of floats in the wind. They there's a white, and now there's a light pink. And the Acris Timid is this one, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, that one's really pretty to get started. And once you have it started, even though the deer eat it down every year, it still grows and is beautiful. The larkspur is also, once you get a little patch started, they self-sow. It can be a little bit hard to get started, but my biggest tip for larkspur, like I said before, is to make sure your soil is cool, like 60 degrees and below. And then it takes off, it gets established. You saw the picture of them in like after that really cold weather. They're completely unfazed. And there's lots of different colors. I don't really grow any of the pinks anymore, but there's like lavenders and blues, pinks. Blues is really purple, but yeah, so that one is a good one to get started, especially just in your yard, like in your own flower beds or whatever. Larkspur is one of those that Debbie has had forever, and this is Debbie. We used them for all the things, and it was one that I was like, I have to have larkspur because it just has a lot of memories. Bachelor buttons are the same way. They are nearly indestructible. The deer eat them down to the ground for me every year, and they still grow. There's so many fun colors of bachelor buttons, and there's so many things that you can do with them. I have a lady that comes and gets them for dyes, like to dye clothing, and I sell most of my bachelor buttons. I actually sell as edible flowers, which is much easier because they can be a little hard to pick. They're a little wiry, and but there's ones that are bigger. There's smaller varieties. There's purple. There's white. There's pink. People don't realize there's so many colors of bachelor buttons, and they're just a really fun one to have established and keep growing. Okay, and then Buplorum is one that my florists like. This is Buplorum. You can see it here in the corner. It's a real booger to get started. I actually started my patch with plugs, but once they're established, they reseed like crazy. But they're just this really cute little yellow flower, and they fill out a bouquet really nicely. They're super hardy. Deer also eat them to the ground every year. There was something else I was gonna say. Oh, but they truly are a one-hit wonder. So if you're doing this to farm flowers, or you're making bouquets or something, you have to succession plant them, because once you cut it, nothing's gonna grow there after till next spring. They'll reseed and start over again. And they can be a little bit tricky to pick. You have to make sure all the little florets are open on most of the stem, or they will wilt. But if you get it at the right point, they last forever. Maybe we should stop there. I'll take a few questions on those, and then we'll take a break. How about that?
Okay, so I got a good question. So I know about the cut and come again. So when you say one hit wonders, these are not. You cut them and that's it. That's all you get that spring. But you're saying they'll just naturally come back the next year. So my question is, what can you do after you harvest them with that space? Can you plant other things in it?
Yes. So usually, I go back and I like mow all my spring stuff down, and then that's where I'll put sunflowers or something like that in the summer. And I think actually going back and mowing everything down kind of spreads the seed. It just sits there all summer. It's not going to grow because the soil's too hot. But then once the soil cools off, they sprout and take off. But if you try to grow them from seed, it's best to direct seed them for sure. And I soak the seed for like, I can't remember, I get this one, at least a few hours. I'll soak it and then I'll spread it out and direct seed it. But once I had my patch, like I got a tray of plugs, and I have not planted it since. It reseeds so well. And it's one that it's definitely like a tender annual. The whole plant dies, but the seeds will start new plants.
How tall are those Buplurums?
I know, that's a hard word to say. I can't ever spell it either. mine are like 3 foot tall or so. I mean, they get really tall.
They look real short, right?
Yeah, yeah, this is, I was trying to show, because it's super important if you're gonna cut them, that these are all open, or they wilt, or you can break some of those off, but, yeah, they're tall. All of these get really, about the same height, like 3 or 4 foot tall at least. Yes,
Things like larkspur, foxglove, delphinium, you know, they all come with a warning on the package, they're toxic if you ingest them. How cautious are you on that with like small children around? I hear a lot of mixed things, I'm not sure how cautious to be or not on that.
so,
Cause they're my favorites and I
I
haven't
know.
grown them.
So, this is part of my doctor world. The plants, from what I have read, are technically not that poisonous. It's the seeds. So, I forgot to repeat the question. How cautious are you with these toxic plants? From what I've read, even for like pets, when I did toxicology, they say it's the seeds. I think that ingesting the plants can give you like a tummy ache. And obviously I don't know. But I was always, even like sweet peas are toxic. So I'm always a little paranoid about that when they start going to seed, because my girls know that like they can go out and pick the peas, like the snap peas, but they look similar. So we have a big talk about that every year. Because they say the seeds are super toxic for sweet peas too. But from what I've read and stuff, it's the seed that's, so I'm not super, but when my girls were really little, I would put them in like the pansies, because then they could eat them. Because I also grow pansies for cut flowers, or like bachelor buttons, stuff like that, because a lot of the hardy annual spring flowers, they say, are toxic. And I was really paranoid about it at first, but then I'm pretty sure it's the seed that has the highest. So, any other questions before we take a break?
How do you know when they're ready to cut?
It depends on the flower. So, like these, you would look at each little floret of flowers and know that like, okay, and you have to kind of get it before it goes to seed, but, like bachelor buttons, I'll pick them at any stage as long as there's like even a little bit of color. Larkspur, I usually wait till about 2/3 of the stem is colored up. It just depends on the flower. And I'll try to remember to talk about each one, but it kind of depends on how much color in each flower is different, because like these will wilt if they're not mature enough. So, any other questions?
Are you gonna be talking about bulbs?
I'm not talking about bulbs. I will briefly discuss ranunculus, because to me they are a hardy annual, not a perennial or bulb. I mean, they are a bulb, but yeah, I'm not talking about. That is a really fun topic, though. I love talking about tulips. So if we have time, if you have a question at the end, I'm happy to answer, because I do a lot of tulips and daffodils. And my tulips I grow in my heated greenhouse, and most of my tulips are done before the ones, like people that plant them in the ground. I try to have all mine done before those start blooming, so I'm not like competing for my florists. So, and tulips are a really easy, fun flower to force, because I'll have tulips for Valentine's Day. So, and in the winter I get a little like, I need color and flowers. So I started doing tulips. I just plant them in crates and bring them in a few at a time, and yeah, so that's a whole nother, forcing tulips could be a whole class probably, but. Okay, let's take a little break, and we'll come back and finish walking through all the flowers.
Allison, just clarification, so you can mow those down, and they're gonna come back the next year, but because I plant my zinnias or
Yes.
something else in that space.
Yes.
So it's not like I mow
The
that.
seed will just be in the